Now, of course, there's other types of weather news, and that is the global warming. There was a geoengineering conference just last week in Berlin, and I wanted to get to it last week, but we never were able to get to some of the papers. And I just wanted to mention this one particular paper is all we've really got time for. This is by a guy who's one of the top climate scientists in terms of references, and I found it very interesting. Now, these people are looking at a way to control the temperature of the Earth because they believe, A, that there's global warming, and B, they believe that it is man-made global warming. So they think that they can now have man-made global cooling. And so they talk about engineering the climate themselves. And his article, his presentation that he had at this conference in Berlin said, why we should not engineer a global thermostat. Now, he starts talking about what is being proposed, which is stratospheric aerosol injection, SAI, stratospheric aerosol injection. In other words, what we would call chemtrails, or what some other people have called persistent contrails. This would essentially be interjecting chemicals into the stratosphere to try to make the Earth cloudy, to adjust the temperature. And of course, we've been able to see that type of thing in areas where they do heavy chemtrailing, where you see them doing persistent contrails in a grid pattern above areas. They can affect a temperature change, but they're talking about it in these papers as if it's something that, well, we are talking about the possibility of doing this, but we're not really doing it yet. No, they're doing it. It's the same thing that the NSA did. They always want to talk about, well, you know, we're not really listening to you. We're not really breaking the law. But, you know, it would be good if we changed the law so that we really could monitor you all the time. It's not really happening, but here's what we are thinking about. Here's what we're planning on doing. But he points out that the risk of putting in stratospheric aerosol injection, he says, is a triple fantasy. This guy is actually not in favor of it, even though he believes that there's global warming and he believes that it's man-made. He's not in favor of geoengineering. He says it's a triple fantasy, that the risks of changing the climate can be diffused effectively by regulating global temperature. He says, secondly, that the world could ever agree on a level to set the thermostat. And third, that the unintended consequences of such intervention are manageable. In other words, he's saying that, first of all, we don't know if it's going to work. Secondly, we don't know what the consequences are going to be. And then thirdly, who gets to set the thermostat if we're going to start changing the climate of the Earth? And he points out a couple of interesting analogies. He said, let's look at experiments. He said, we always do experiments are entered into because the outcome is not known. What's going to happen to patients who get a new drug? Are crops going to grow faster after we give them a new fertilizer? He says, we're going to just start doing this, and we're not really going to have a way to test it. And that's exactly what I believe they have been doing. And many of us who've been watching the chemtrail situation, of course, now I guess we could sound more scientific if we called it stratospheric aerosol injection. Maybe we just need to change what we call it to get people to take it seriously. But he concludes and he says, Aldous Huxley's 1932 novel, Brave New World, can be understood as portraying either a too perfectly controlled utopia or a brutal and inhuman dystopia. He says, I compare Huxley's tale with the vision behind the technology of stratospheric aerosol injection and other global sunlight reflection methods. In other words, are we going to try to control this into a utopia, or is it going to be a dystopian thing? And he points out that there's plenty of things that we could do to try to make life better on Earth just by looking at how governments and other institutions are affecting, for instance, our personal liberty. It's a very dangerous path that they're going down. And so they're actually in this conference, it was interesting to see that they're debating this, but of course we believe that they already are doing it, and there's ample evidence that they've been doing it for quite some time.
You are watching the best of the Alex Jones Show, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central. Watch live at Infowars.com/show or become a member of InfoWarsNews.com and help us take resistance to the next level.